Alright, this video is on circles. You guys know about circles. All it is a center and a radius, right? So a certain distance out, maybe it's 3 inches, for example, okay? And that is consistent all the way around, right? So it'll be all the points that are 3 inches away from that center point, okay? So keeping that in mind, we're going to look at circles in the coordinate plane, okay? So let me give you some basic examples to start with and ignore how uncircly my circles are going to be, okay? So let's start with, let's say we have a circle that's at the origin, which is 0, 0, and maybe it's 3 units is my radius, like we were just talking about. So 1, 2, 3 is going to go 3 units to the left, 1, 2, 3 units to the right, and 1, 2, 3 units down, and 1, 2, 3 units up. It's consistent all the way around. I'm going to try to connect these as best I can. Like I said, it's not going to be a beautiful circle, but it's really not too bad for freehand. All right, so anyway, so this circle would have a center of 0, 0 with a radius of 3. Okay, so center of 0, 0 and a radius that equals 3 for units, okay? Now, in the coordinate plane, we deal with units, not necessarily centimeters, inches, that kind of thing, okay? So let's look at, that's pretty simple, to find the center, given an ordered pair, and find the radius, okay? So now I'm going to show you how to plug that in. We have a basic formula for the equation of the circle. So this first video is just going to do the basic equation, okay? And it's going to look weird, but once I explain it, it'll make sense. All right, so it looks like this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now, algebra 2, you've learned this maybe, if you got that far in class, and maybe you didn't, I don't know, it depends on the teacher and how the year went. Kind of like this year is kind of topsy-turvy. Okay, all this is saying is, I've got this equation, and this h and k represent my center. All right, whatever my center is, and r is my radius. Make sense? Okay, so if I was to plug in this, right, I would have a 0 here, right, because my center is 0, 0, 0, 0, and my radius is 3, so I'd put a 3 here. Does that make sense? All I'm doing is plugging in those 3 numbers. Pretty basic concept, right? Okay, now if it's 0, we normally are going to simplify it to look like this: x squared plus y squared equals, and 3 squared is 9, right? So that would tell me I had a center of 0, 0, and I'd take the square root of 9 and get 3, and I know my radius is 3, okay? So let's practice a few more of these, and I will, in this video, I'll add another how to get it in standard form, because that's considered standard form. Sometimes they'll have it looking all cray-cray, and we'll talk about that later. So let's just go through it. I'm going to list some different centers and radiuses, and we're going to practice plugging it in and simplifying the equation. Okay, so let's say I have a center of 2, 4, and I'll just put C for center, and a radius of 7. Okay, so there again, I'm going to come back to my equation, right? And x and y, they're there. And so I'd say minus 2, because that's my x of my center. And then I'd say minus 4, because that's my center. And then I would say 7 squared. Now, this I can't simplify any further. X minus 2 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals, 7 squared is 49. So that would be in simplest form, right? Now notice my center is positive, isn't it? 2, 4 is positive, but in my equation it's minus, okay? So it's always going to be the opposite sign. So let's look at one where I make it a negative number and see what happens to my equation, okay? So let's say center to negative 3 and a radius of 4. Okay, so here I go again. Parentheses squared, okay? First one's x, second one's y. All right, so x minus, my x is 2. And then minus, my y this time is a -3. And then 4 is my radius, 4 squared. Now, let's simplify this. That's x minus 2 squared. Nothing I can do there. But what happens when I have minus a negative? If you remember correctly, it becomes a plus. Okay? And then 4 squared is 16. So see now when you see that plus in there, that tells me it's a -3. So take the opposite sign if that's how the best way to explain it. Okay? So that's taking the center and the radius and putting it into the equation. What if I start with the equation and ask for the center and the radius? This is going backwards. So let's say I have x minus 2 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 16. So if I remember correctly, my center is going to be these numbers here, and I got to change the sign so that becomes a +2 and a +4, right? And then my radius, I have to be careful. That's my radius squared. So the square root of 16 is 4, right? So I have to take the square root of that, okay? Does that make sense? Let's try one with the negative signs and maybe one that's not a perfect square, okay? So x plus 3 squared plus y squared equals 24, okay? So on this one, it looks a little different, doesn't it? I got to change this sign so my center would be at -3. There's nothing subtracted here, so it'd be 0. And then my radius, I'd have to say the square root of 24. Now, sometimes they'll put it in simplest radical, okay? Now, let me refresh you on that. So what'll go into 24? All kinds of stuff, but I start off with 2 and 12. Okay, I broke that down. And 12 is 2 and 6. And 6 is 2 and 3, right? So I got a pair of 2's. So 2. And I have a 2 and a 3 left over, so square root of 6. So that would be my radius is 2 square root of 6. Either way would work. Either the square root of 24 or 2 square root of 6. If you're on the ACT, you could always plug in the square root of 24, get a decimal answer, and then find the one that has the same decimal answer if that became an issue. I hope this was helpful.